Good morning, everyone. I'm Reverend Dori, and this is the last of our series of Bible studies on the Torah. We're looking today at Deuteronomy, which is the last of the 5 books of the Torah. And it seems appropriate that we had a middle week because Deuteronomy is really out there from the others. The others are kind of a unit. We think of them as having been developed over the years and edited by the priestly writers. The Deuteronomy is really, in many sense of the words, it really belongs with the prophets. But it's put in the Torah because it's written under the name of Moses. Now, at that time, it was very common, actually, to write as though it was written by someone whose authority you want to claim, okay? So, if you want to claim the authority of, say, Paul, you might write a letter that seems as though it's written by Paul and you're claiming Paul's authority, even though it's written many years after Paul has died. So we have this trend all through the early scriptures. It's one of the reasons why people didn't trust written documents that much. So Deuteronomy is off on it by itself. Its Hebrew is different from the rest, and its intent is different. Now, it has many of the same kind of laws in it. It repeats many of the laws. It repeats the 10 Commandments in chapter 5, for example. But they have a different spin on them. In Deuteronomy, the spin is not about obeying all the laws. There are 613 laws in the Torah, and there's this myth that if one Jew could obey all 613 perfectly for one day, then the Messiah would come. So it was about being pure, about being ritualistic, pure, about following all the law and all the sins that were attached to those laws. But in the book of Deuteronomy, you have many of the same laws, but they have a different spin. They have instead an understanding of God having made covenant with the people and God being in relationship. And these laws are only as a way of showing loyalty to the covenant. So it's the covenant that is important in Deuteronomy. And it purports to be Moses' last will and testament. So Moses is standing up before the people. All the original people have died who came out of Egypt. It's a whole new generation. He's trying to help them remember what went on in the past, or in the 40 years past, about how God continually helped them, but also he continually talks about how God made a covenant with these people. Now, who do you make a covenant with? You make a covenant with people who you want to pair with, who you want to communicate with, who you want to be with. You make a covenant with people that you love, okay? And even though there's struggle and there's hardship and there's punishment and so on, I don't know about you, but the only person that I get angry with is my husband, who I love dearly, okay? It's a struggle oftentimes with the people we love to continue to be in relationship, in covenant with them. So that's what the book of Deuteronomy is about. And in order to really understand it, we need to make sure that we understand a little bit more about the history of the time that we believe that it was written. Because nobody believes it was written, well, I shouldn't say nobody. Scholars don't believe that it was written by Moses, okay? But it's put in the Torah because it's purportedly Moses' last will and testament. Even though, and it's a series of sermons actually, there's an introductory sermon, then there's a big sermon, and then there's a whole bunch of curses, and then there's several songs and poems, and then Moses dies in the pulpit essentially, because it ends with Moses going up on the mountain and dying. So that's kind of what Deuteronomy has in it. But in order to understand this, we have to look at the last days of the kingdom of Judah. Now, in 722, the Assyrians come and they wipe out the northern kingdom of Israel. But King Hezekiah is king, and he invites people from Israel to come, and the population of Judah doubles, is what we now know. So they invited people from Israel who had been their former enemies into their land, and they brought with them some of their ideas and their prophets. At the time of Hezekiah, Isaiah is the prophet to King Hezekiah. But you need to go back a little bit to Ahaz, who is Hezekiah's father. Now there's this kind of roller coaster that goes on where you have people who are, according to the Bible, did the right thing, the kings who did the right thing because they kept up the covenant with Yahweh. And then you had the kings who did the wrong thing. They set up the temples to all of the Canaanite gods and to the Assyrian gods. And then you again have the temple of Yahweh. So you have this roller coaster. Ahaz is about pagan religion. His son Hezekiah tears down the pagan sites and builds up the worship of Yahweh. And then Manasseh, who is his son, again tears down the temple, well, brings in all kinds of Assyrian gods into the temple. He actually sacrifices his son into the fire. He brings back the Canaanite gods. Even though he rules for 55 years, he's given about this much in the Bible as being a terrible king. And then he dies and his son takes over, but there's a massive sort of popular uprising, and that son is killed, assassinated, and King Josiah comes on at the age of 8. And he, again, wants to bring back the worship of Yahweh. And one of the things he does is he says, okay, we're going to clean out the temple. We're going to get rid of all the pagan altars, get rid of everything, and clean it up. And in the rubble, they find this book, the Book of the Covenant, okay? And most scholars believe that this book was written by people who were helping Hezekiah kind of reestablish the worship of Yahweh, okay? So you have King Josiah is very much on Yahweh's side. He cuts down all of the temples to the Canaanites. He gets rid of the sacrifices. He gets rid of all the priests of the Assyrian gods and so on. So, and this scroll, when it's found, they read it to him. He rips his clothes, which is a sign of great mourning, and he comes back and calls all the people together, and they read it in a public reading, and then they reestablish a covenant with God. So that is the purpose of this book, to reestablish a covenant with God, and it's done at this time, at Josiah's time. Now, Josiah dies. He rules for like 31 years, and he dies only about 12 years before the Babylonians come at this time and destroy Judah. So this is the background of the book. But before I finish, I want to say, so why bother with the Old Testament? A lot of people might have thought, well, that's where you might start this whole series. But I wanted you to get excited about the Old Testament before we ask the questions of why bother. And even in our churches today, most people can't tell you what the Ten Commandments, they can tell you that they believe in the Ten Commandments, but then they can't name any of them. Or maybe they can name only a couple of them. You shall not steal, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, but that's about what people know about the Ten Commandments. And so it's really important to understand that in many ways, the second commandment is you shall have no graven images. The Yahweh shall be your God, and you shall not make any images of God. So if you can't have sculptures, then what you're left with is stories. And so you have, in many ways, the Old Testament, a lot of people say that it's the beginning of history as we now know it. In written history, they become the people of the book. It's also highly influential in the development of Western civilization. Even the Greek philosophers were really influenced by the Old Testament. Virtually all justice movements have started in the Old Testament. They use the Old Testament as their scriptures, and like Martin Luther King quoted the Old Testament a lot. And really, in many ways, the whole notion of justice for the poor begins in the Old Testament. That's what's radical about what Moses has to say, is that God was on the side of the slaves, and we have to be as well. It's also the support for the New Testament. It's the book that Jesus read. I have this. This is a wonderful, wonderful book by Philip Yancey. It's the Bible that Jesus read. Jesus and all the New Testament writers really use the Old Testament. They quote it a lot. They assume its background. But mostly it's important because it records the life with God. And this is the recording of how people learned more and more about God, how they found God to be personal, they found God to be surrounding them, not some God who was way up in the heavens, or some God to be feared, but God who was personal to them, and a God who struggles with them and that they can struggle with. The word Isaiah means Israel means struggles with God. And the Old Testament is a recording of how these chosen people, struggled with God in their covenant relationship with God. And many people, one of the things that he talks about in the book is how his father-in-law, who was Norman, what's his name? It doesn't matter. His father-in-law was a missionary in South America and taught the Bible and was really a strong New Testament person. But at the end of his life, he ended up with this terrible neurological disease and spent the last 3 or 4 years of his life totally bedridden. And when in those situations, when he was struggling with life, he turned to the Old Testament, to the Psalms, to Job, to Lamentations, to Deuteronomy. So that is the end of our thing. I want to end by saying one more thing. The Great Shema is in Deuteronomy. It is what Jews say every morning. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. I actually wear a ring that has the Great Shema on it. It's a spinner ring, so when you spin it, it prays it for you. There's 2 ways of reading this. As you know, Hebrew doesn't have any punctuation and it doesn't have any vowels. So the old way of reading it is Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. But many scholars believe that the original reading of it was Yahweh is our God, Yahweh alone, which may have been an older understanding that Yahweh is our God. We are in covenant with Yahweh. Yahweh alone is our God. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other gods that other people are in covenant with. So I leave you with the Great Shema. I thank you so much for coming to my class, and I have loved it, and I hope we can do it again sometime.